Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome into the Gridiron Show. My name is Michael McQuaid. In Ollie Connolly's place today and in Simon Clancy's place as they recover from a late night NFL draft extravaganza over the last couple of days. I've got very good company today. I've got my friend Jeff Reinebold. I'm sure we've all seen Jeff over the last few days on TV with Sky Sports and been very active on Twitter, Jeff, over in Las Vegas the last few days. First off, welcome in. How are you doing?
I'm doing really good. It's early in the morning here. Mike, this place is amazing, right? I came down in the lobby at 6 o'clock this morning, right? And there are people smoking cigarettes, throwing dice. It's just amazing. This city does not sleep and it never stops.
It doesn't stop. And for anyone listening to this podcast, this is being recorded just before the final day of action starts in the NFL draft. And I guess before we sort of look at or talk about the first few picks, even from Thursday night, Jeff, what's your experience been like in Las Vegas over the last few days? You've gave us a few hints there. You've done a couple of shows with Sky. It seems to be a very memorable place and a place I would say will host a number of different drafts throughout the next few years.
Well, I think it's set the standard now for what this draft experience is. You can't even say draft day. You just got to say draft experience because much like the London games, you see every jersey of every team here. I had a great time the other day, Michael, and I just went around and randomly grabbed fans out on Las Vegas Boulevard, which is known as the Strip, and talked to them about who they wanted their teams to take. And it's incredible, the passion of the fans, the knowledge of the fans, and whether it was interviewing the top 18 players which the NFL brought to Vegas for the draft, or a random fan on the street, or an NFL alumnus that you would meet. I mean, everybody is pumped up about the draft because the draft is hope for your team. I know you as a Bronco fan. I mean, even though you didn't have a first round pick because you got Russell Wilson, you still think, hey, this is a chance to improve our football team.
Absolutely, and it's been, even just from sitting at home and not being in Vegas, it's been very enjoyable to watch over the last few days. And I was speaking to you on Wednesday night. I was talking to Ollie and Sai, obviously on Wednesday night as well. A lot of the talk started to come out, and this is something that Ollie predicted weeks ago with Sai saying Trevon Walker is very likely to go number one, and he did go number one to the Jags, Jeff. Georgia prospect going to the Jaguars. We were talking on Wednesday night, and if we sort of focus on that first pick first off, were you convinced that he was going to go number one, or did you think in the end that maybe Hutchinson would have went, or it sort of just changed the last few days, didn't it? And that whole focus really went towards Walker.
Yeah, it was really interesting, and this is really something that the fans, I think, can grab onto, and as you recognize how the process works, because a lot of times, what we as fans see is the end result. We don't see how this all comes to be. And Ollie and Sai did a great job of breaking the draft down all year. And what happened was, at the end of the season, when the football games were all done being played, there was 100% consensus that it would be Aiden Hutchinson would be the first player picked. How could you not, right? The quarterback pool was weak. He was beyond a doubt the best defensive player in the draft. Most productive defensive player, 14 and a half sacks, finished second in the Heisman Trophy balloting. That's incredibly hard for a defensive lineman to finish that high. So that's the recognition of the production that he had while he was at Michigan. Then the process begins. And what you have to understand is these guys are evaluated in a lot of different things, not just their tape, but, at the combine, they're weighed, measured, every conceivable and sometimes some irrational tests are given to these guys to try and figure out which ones have the most, what we call upside, or the potential, the ceiling as a player. And Trevon Walker, and I want to be clear about this, has had 9 sacks in 3 years as a defensive lineman, a rusher at Georgia. 9. Aiden Hutchinson had 14 and a half in one season. All right. So there's no comparison between the two players production wise. However, traits You know, you're going to hear this word a lot when we talk today. Traits. Okay. Walker at well over 270 pounds runs 4.5. He runs like a receiver, right? So what happens is immediately the football guys say, "Oh my God, he'll be unblockable in the National Football League." But the fact of the matter is, and I hope the kid develops. I really hope he develops into what he's capable of being, physically capable of being. But the reality of it is, your film is your resume, and the coaches at Georgia are not stupid guys, right? And I heard this. David Carr made a great point the other night, right? He said, "Do you think they didn't want him to get to the quarterback at Georgia?" I mean, it's like, come on, right? And so many times, and we've seen this numerous times in the NFL, the arrogance of the coaching staffs in the NFL and the personnel people say, "We'll make him a player. We'll take that wonderful piece of clay and we'll make him a player." And I'm going to say this, right? Carson Wentz is on his third football team. Third, right? After being drafted in the first round, right? Why was he drafted in the first round? Because he was big, he was athletic, he had a great arm, all of the attributes, the traits, right, that said he should be able to develop into an incredible NFL quarterback, a franchise quarterback. He's failed in Philadelphia, he's failed in Indianapolis, now he's in Washington, right? And this is in less than 5 years as a professional football player. There have been 2 coaching staffs that have failed to make him what his traits say he should be. I think personally, it's incredibly risky for a team like Jacksonville that needs football players, right? Not testers, football players, to turn that franchise around. It's a huge gamble by Jacksonville.
I love that. There's a title of this YouTube video. It's a huge gamble. No, look, I liked it, and when we started seeing, so someone tweeted out, I can't remember who it was, on Wednesday night saying, per source, Jacksonville are locked in on Trayvon Walker, and I was like, no, they're going to go Hutchinson. But the thing about Walker is obviously in that what'll probably go down in history, that Georgia Bulldogs defense, Jeff. Like, he really still needs to develop his sequencing plan as a pass rusher. He's not the finished product. I mean, look, nobody in the draft is, yeah, but there is still a good bit of work to do for him now. How do you think he's going to get on maybe this season with Jacksonville? Because the Jaguars, look, every team wants to go 16, 17 and 0 now with the extra week, but they could be looking at a similar, maybe not similar pick next year in the first 5 picks, but they could be looking at drafting highly again next year. And for him, what would be a successful season, do you think, trying to embed himself into this team?
Well, I think he's going to have to play, right? Because they drafted him as the first player picked in the draft, right? Michael, I know this for a fact. There was division in the building in Jacksonville about this pick. There was concern that if they took an edge player first, whether it was Hutchinson or whether it was Trayvon Walker or whether it was Kayvon Thibodeau or any of the edge players, and he failed, right? There's exposure as an edge player that there isn't as, say, an offensive lineman. So there was some consensus in the building to go to Ekwonu, who is the tackle out of NC State, and then they could, if he couldn't play tackle, he could slide him into guard, and he could play guard for you. If you draft an edge player with the first pick, and he fails, you can't hide him. There's no place for him to go, right? So that's why there was some concern in the building in Jacksonville about taking an edge player first. And it kind of was really interesting because Daniel Jeremiah, who I think is the most well-respected draft evaluator in the business, right? Was a scout for a number of years. He had Hutchinson as his top player. And even as late as the last week before the draft, he compared not the 40 times, he compared the short shuttle times and the explosive movement measurements of Hutchinson and Trayvon Walker And Hutchinson was just as good or better in those more key statistics, because and again, this is what baffles me and about the combine. When in the world is Kayvon Thibodeau, Trayvon Walker, Hutchinson, any of those edge guys ever going to run a straight line 40 yards? It's not going to happen. They're not going to cover kicks. And even on a cover to kickoff, you got to avoid somebody at some point, right? That is an antiquated measurement that has no value in today's NFL. Or I'd say little value in today's NFL. But yet we cling to it, right? It's like in the Olympic Games. What's the glamour event? It's the 100 meters, right? Because they say that's the fastest man in the world. Well, he is in 100 meters, but it's a sexy measurement, and it's way outlived its usefulness.
Loving the terms there, Jeff. I feel, and this is the thing about the draft this year, especially. I feel like we could sit here from now until the start of training camp to talk about some of these decisions and talk about the sheer unpredictableness of this. And we'll get into the quarterback talk in a little minute, but let's focus on that guy you were talking about in regards to Walker. Aiden Hutchinson played in Michigan. Obviously, he was a Michigan Wolverine. He's staying in Jim Harbaugh, quote, the great state of Michigan, now playing with the Detroit Lions, getting picked second overall, Jeff. This is a guy, he doesn't really have the same skills as like the Bosa brothers, for example, but his potential and his quickness and his skilled hand play, this is really going to help this Lions team going forward, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think there's a couple things here, that we need to be aware of, right? And one of them was a little, just a snippet after he was drafted that I thought was really, if I'm a Lions fan or I'm somebody in that building, when a kid says it, I go, yes, that's our guy. Because what he said when he was interviewed right after he was drafted by the Lions is, I get to stay home in Detroit, right? Not I have to go to Detroit, because the want to be there, the want to turn that program, his home state team. It is, Michael, when I talked to Lions fans this week around Vegas, they were unanimous in hoping that Hutchinson would fall to them with the second pick. And I am sure that Dan Campbell and everybody in that building in Detroit, Chris Spielman and everybody that's in the decision-making process in Detroit, was elated to have that kid. I thought the Lions had a phenomenal first day, because think about what they did. They had those two picks, and you get the highest rated defensive player and you get the highest rated receiver in the draft with your two picks. Now, you took Penei Sewell last year, who is, a phenomenally talented offensive lineman. Those are the kinds of picks you need to make to turn your franchise.
Every player is like this, but Hutchinson really is a guy that will not give up until the end of that game. And this is the sort of player that Detroit needs. And I'm really intrigued to see what's going to happen, Jeff. And look, he's really able to create separation in many different ways. And he's really got massive types of aggression. And I think you're really going to see him create a difference on the football field from week one, from day one, from that first game. What do you think his ceiling is in Detroit? Like, do you think who is the higher ceiling, Walker or Hutchinson for you?
Well, well, there's no question Walker has the highest ceiling, because he's an unbelievable athlete, right? You don't find guys at his size that can bend and accelerate and run the way he can run, right? Now, again, David Carr makes a great point, right? And I got to give props to guys that I think know what they're talking about. David Carr was a quarterback in the National Football League for a lot of years, right? That doesn't make him an authority, but it makes him a guy I want to listen to. Right? So what David Carr says is, okay, everybody talks about his position flexibility because he can run like that, right? And yes, at Georgia, they did drop him into coverage some. right? But he's not an instinctive coverage player. He's a guy you can drop into coverage 3 or 4 times a game, right? He has the coverage skills that Von Miller had when he was playing for Wade Phillips. Every once in a while, you drop him into coverage, just as a changeup. You don't want to do it on a steady diet because he's not an instinctive player in space, right? That's the concern that I have with the kid. Is if you are that talented, right? You have those kind of measurables, and you're playing on a defense with great players around you, right? Because Georgia had more defensive players drafted than any team in history yesterday, right? How can you not show up more than you show up on tape? Because it's always the tape. You always go back to the tape. Now, Trent Baalke is a measurements guy. And it's worked for him in the past. Aldon Smith, measurement guy at Missouri, not somebody who was a household name. And he comes and he has, I think, 14 and a half sacks in 2 years or some crazy thing, right? And then couldn't handle himself off the field and, is out of the NFL. But he did translate from Missouri to the NFL. This kid's going to have to make the same transfer.
If we're going to sort of just go into the third pick, we'll try and look at the first 5 here in the show, Jeff. But the first quarterback off the board was Houston. And look, we'll talk about this guy next. And then I had Sauce Gardner going number one for me in terms of quarterbacks. But Derek Stingley Jr., I like what the Texans have done in this draft, but not just in the draft, what they've done since the last ball was thrown in the start of January for them, bringing in the new head coach, this new philosophy. He fits their style big time, doesn't it? Like, this is a good pick for this Texans team.
Yeah, now again. See, these are the kind of things I'd love to. I think this is great that we get to talk about these kinds of issues, right? Because Stingley's another one of those guys that was all over the place in the draft process, right? I could take out his UCLA tape from his senior, his last year at LSU, and you would say, man, that guy's not very good, right? And I'm serious. It was hard to watch, right? Or I could take out his freshman tape when he's at LSU, and you take him in the first round as a freshman, right? Look at his practice tape, and I found a couple snippets of that where he goes up against Justin Jefferson, and he goes up against all those great receivers, and he's gloving them up as a freshman. He did not play well in the COVID year, right? That was such a crazy situation. You can't downgrade a kid very much for that. But then his last year, he was hurt and tried to play through it. So his statistics and his tape aren't very good, right? And Sauce jumped ahead of him because Sauce had a much more productive year. And Sauce is longer and so on and so forth. But through the draft process, Stingley reestablished himself at his pro day when he went out and ran extremely well, showed that he could put his foot in the ground and drive on the ball. The questions with Stingley are, does his motor run all the time, right? Well, he has the physical ability. He's shown he can do it. Now he's got to do it all the time because the NFL and college football ain't even close, right? The margins for error, your ability to take plays off, all that, not even close, right? So the question with Stingley will be not physical because he had a Liz Frank surgery. He's healed up. He's proven that he's back physically. His competitiveness and his ability to play hard down in and down out, that's what he's got to show. If he does, he'll be a great player in the league because he has all the talent.
In terms of what you're saying in regards to his injuries, he had a lower or a leg injury in December 2020. He missed 2 games, missed the final 9 games as a junior after surgery to repair a torn Lisfranc ligament. Never tore my Lisfranc ligament, Jeff, but sounds sore. In October 2021, he needs to stay in the field, doesn't he? If he doesn't stay in the field, it's not going to happen. But you'd like to think he's got the worst over him.
Yeah, and some of that's luck, right? some guys just don't have, they're unlucky, but we talk in coaching about make your greatest ability your availability, right? Because if you're a great player and you're standing on the sideline or you're in the trainer's room, we can't win that way, right? So they're going to have to keep him on the field. But I like the pick and I like the kid. I just think that, here's what happens during the process. People start looking for reasons to not take you, right? And with Stingley, they found some, right? Early, right? The production wasn't there. The tape wasn't very good. The injury. So he had to reestablish his position, and he did that successfully. He went to Dallas. He trained with some guys in Dallas. He got healthy, and he had an awesome pro day.
Let's look at number 4. The background of this stream is green. One team that wears green has done very well in this draft, the New York Jets. I mean, my God, if there was an award for winning the draft, I think the Jets have got it, Jeff. Sauce Gardner going at 4. Look, Cincinnati hasn't produced an NFL first-round pick since 1971. They have now. What a pick to start it off with the Jets, yeah. Number 4 on the board.
Yeah, and and again, and as I evaluate players, right, and I looked at him, and I was skeptical at first, right, because here's a kid that plays in a non-Power 5 conference, right, and so you don't see the same speed, you don't see the same receivers, you don't see the same quarterbacks when you're playing Marshall or East Carolina or Tulane or any of those schools which are in their conference. You're not seeing Alabama, you're not seeing Texas, you're not seeing, what I mean saying. So all of a sudden you watch the kid and you watch the kid and you watch the kid, and all of a sudden you realize, hey, he's 6'1", which is tall for a corner, and everybody's looking for big corners. And you say, well, okay, now if he's 6'1", he probably has most 6'1" guys that play corner. They can't bend. They can't transition. He's smooth in transition. He can bend. And the thing that really separates him for me, he's got great ball skills, and he will hit you, right? He's not a conscientious objector out there at corner that's not going to tackle anybody. He will hit you. And, he's got the mental and psychological makeup all great corners have, right? He's never been beaten, ever. Ask him the last time he got, I swear to this, ask him the last time he got beat, he said, I don't remember, right? And that's the mindset. That's the mindset you've got to have. You've got to have that at the corner, because you're going to get beat, and you got to put it away, and you got to play the next down.
The whole thing, I don't know if you've seen the video from the New York Jets war room. Good to have the war rooms back after COVID. They were buzzing. They were swearing. They were partying. They were loving the picks. He's very like sort of sleek, but he's very lean. Do you think he's too lean for his position, or do you think he has to bulk up a bit to try and keep going in the NFL? Because you did say it in the last few picks, the step up between college and the NFL is monumental, to say the least.
Yeah, and it's different at different positions, right? And when you talk about size, there are certain positions on the field where bulk and weight are important. There are certain positions on the field where play strength is important. And I didn't say size, I said play strength. And so when you look at Sauce Gardner, what you see is a lean athlete who has great play strength. And there's a day 2 receiver, or DB from kid named Flock from LSU, weighs about 175 pounds. But you look at his competitiveness and you look at his play strength. He doesn't miss tackles because he's not strong enough. He's aggressive, So that's where, again, that's a measurable. That's a relative measurable.
Let's round off the top 5 before we get a couple of final thoughts, Jeff, about quarterbacks and maybe your experience in the Bellagio, etc., and some tips in the future in Vegas. Giants fans are happy. A few Giants mates over here, obviously, in Ireland, UK, they're very happy, Jeff. Kevin Thibodeau going to 5, and we'll talk about number 7 maybe in a different show. But look, I mean, for him to be sitting at 5, they must have been extremely happy to get their man at 5 there. And this is the guy that can Well, he's confident, isn't he? It reminds me. It reminds me a bit of OBJ's confidence. And I don't know if you've seen his interview after he was picked. He's a happy man, but he's got the confidence, Jeff, to go into the league. And if he can perform as well as he talks, he could be a Pro Bowler first year.
Well, again, this guy was a lightning rod during the evaluation process. You put on the tape, wow. I mean, wow. He's got such great quickness off the ball. He's got length. He's got more sophisticated arsenal of pass rush moves than most kids do coming out of college. Now, remember, the guy who coached him at Oregon is a guy named Joe Salavea. And Joe Salavea played in the National Football League. I have some friends on that Oregon staff, and I ask them about this kid. And they think he's gotten a ridiculously wrong narrative about who he really is. The reality of Kayvon Thibodeau is he's extremely smart, and he has interests outside of football, and he does talk. And sometimes when you say things like, for example, he says, well, I might just want to work at a big company like Nike and not play, right? Well, all of a sudden, all of the, quote, football guys, they go, oh, my God, he's not committed to football, right? Again, I think that you got to be really careful when you do that. When I talked to Bucky Brooks about this kid, Bucky made a really good point, right? He said, scheme fit is important, but coaching fit is more important. Because this is a kid that is going to question you, right? Not because he's a knucklehead. He's going to question you because he wants to know, right? And so he's going to have to go to a place where he's got a coaching staff that understands it and is willing to adjust to his personality. He has a strong personality. There's been a lot of guys that have strong personalities. If you think there aren't strong personalities in the NFL, you better check again, because these are alpha males, dude. These guys this ain't the regular guy walking on the street, these guys, right? So, you got to be able to adjust your coaching style to the athlete that you have. I like the kid. I talked to him the day before the draft, and I liked him a lot. He's fun. I mean, he's fun to be around. And, he handled, I think, some really almost like they were attacks on his character, right? And one thing he said to me, Michael, was, which I took as a good thing. He said, it really, I can let it go, but it bothers me when my mom has to hear that kind of stuff, and that says a lot to me, right? So I think he's going to be hugely successful there, and what a guy's made for New York. I mean, he's made for New York.
The ceiling for New York now, with the new GM in, with the whole Daniel Jones situation, and now Kayvon Thibodeau coming in. Never mind talking about pick 7 later on, but it's going to be intriguing. You said you were speaking to him. He has got quite a narrow sort of torso, and he may need to bulk up. He's got like lean legs. Did that stand out to you, or do you think he's
It's funny. I love it when you know where to go. It's almost like you tee me up. So I'm standing out there with those guys, right? And so, because it's been what I've done for 30 years, like when I look at an athlete, I immediately, it's like a checklist as you look at him, right? By position, okay? So Aiden Hutchinson walks up, right? He's probably 6'6", maybe 6'7". And I had read all the stuff, right? And I'd watched the tape. But I'd never met the kid in person, right? So he walks up, and Neil's talking to him, interviewing him. And so I'm giving him the once over, the coach's once over, right? Just like you used to do when you do it when I was back in college. You walk into the high school, right? And it'd be the time when you couldn't talk to them, but the coach would parade them past you like they were an animal on parade, right? And then you'd see how tall they were. You'd look at their bodies and how they walked and all that stuff. So Hutchinson's standing there, and I had read all this stuff about his short arms, right? So I thought I was going to see like a Tyrannosaurus Rex, like his arms are going to be like this. And his arms are plenty long enough, It's just like, are you kidding me? But that's the overhype of the draft, right? Okay, so then Kayvon walks up, and the things that you talk about, I'm telling you, Kayvon Thibodeau's a full-grown man. Don't worry about it. He's gonna be fine with those other guys, And
See,
Malik Willis walks up, right? And I told Malik this. I said, Malik, I look at you, and I coach Doug Flutie, and you're way bigger than Doug Flutie, number one. And number two, when you look at Malik Willis, the first thing that strikes you about him physically is his lower body. He is big. I mean, he is thick in his waist, and not fat thick. He's strong in his hips and his thighs and his lower body, right? That's what you throw from. That's your throwing platform, right? So that's an interesting thing.
The next time I see you in person, I think you're going to look me up and down and do your coaches. I mean, what position could he play here, sort of thing, and see what's going on.
You know what, Michael? That's something that they really should teach, right? Because a lot of and this is the difference between talent evaluators and information gatherers, right? There's two types of scouts in the NFL. And these are typically the younger guys, right? And they're the guys that go in and they go, they measure them, they put a 40 time on them, they measure their vertical. Okay, they measure the players. The talent evaluators are the guys that look at all the other stuff, not just the tape. Does he look you in the eye when he talks to you? How big is he? Look at his proportions. How does he walk? Where's the weight on his feet when he walks? Right? All of those things. Is he knock-kneed? Is he bow-legged? All that stuff that so many of these people that work in that's why they make so many mistakes, right?
It's fun, Jeff, and it's not silly season, but it's fun season. We're getting so much analysis, so much content. It's fantastic. Look, it's great to talk through the first 5 picks there in the draft, and I think we could talk for a week about the rest of the first round of the draft. But just why this will have you maybe for the next 5 minutes, and we'll cap this podcast. Couple of things. Round 2 and round 3 were interesting. I feel like we could sit here and talk about quarterbacks, wide receivers, how the whole first round played out. But I know there'll be people watching that maybe woke up on Saturday morning, for example, and seen David Ojabo going to 45 to Baltimore. And for you, obviously with his injury in the last few weeks and months, did you think he'd be at? Do you think 45 was about right? There was a time on Thursday night that I thought he could go here in the late 20s when it was starting to open up a bit, because that whole draft completely changed when those trades started coming in. It was like a free for all at one point.
Well, I think, Mike, the thing that happens, and I think what caused Ojabo to go at 45 beyond the injury, right? Because he's way higher graded than 45, but he has a torn Achilles. Now, every team did a medical on him. Every team looked at him post-surgically, all that stuff. But they're not as concerned about those. That's not an injury that you can't come back from, right? I think what happened to Ojabo is there were so many edge players in this draft that teams had to make a decision about, is our need so strong at edge that we, with all these good players out there, that we take Ojabo with the fact that maybe he won't play until October or November, right? Or do we need a guy in camp to make it? They have to weigh that, right? And because the edge class was so deep, he got pushed down a little bit. Now, I thought it was really interesting, and I'm really happy for him that he went to Baltimore, because number one, his college defensive coordinator is in Baltimore, so he knows the kid, right? And I'm sure when the Ravens were in that draft room talking about making that pick, they went to that guy and they said, "Hey, what do you think?" Because he knows him, right? Mel Kiper don't know him, I don't know him. That guy coached him. That guy knows what makes that kid tick, right? And so you lean on that selection. And he's going to a team where he doesn't need to be on the field right now. They can be very, very, if they need to, they can redshirt him for a year. right? It's the same thing Tennessee did with Jeffrey Simmons, and look at what kind of player he's turned into, right? And they took him knowing that the value that he could bring when healthy was worth the wait. And I think the Ravens did a great job.
Congratulations to David and his family. An incredible journey for the Scotland and Nigeria man. And yeah, wrap him in cotton wool if needs be for the next 6 to 12 months. Just before we go, a couple of last points. Jeff, I was sitting on Friday night trying to watch the third round of the draft. Nakobe Dean went at 83 to the Eagles. 83, Nakobe Dean. The guy is sensational.
Okay, here's the deal with him. And there were a couple kids that slid. And there's always a story behind the slide, right? The one that shocked me initially as we were doing the draft was Jermaine Johnson from Florida State, right? And again, where'd he go?
I haven't got the exact number now. I know where he went in the first, but it's Jermaine Johnson. It's been a long 2 days. What number did he go?
Way lower. Some people had him in the top 5, right?
He went 20. Was it 20?
And there was, because there was, quote, this narrative about, his attitude, right? That stuff gets, here's what happens. And this is so, it's unfortunate, but it happens. If you want a guy, right, you got a couple ways you can get him. You can, if he's not, you don't think he's going to be there when you are going to draft. Well, one way is trade up, right? But you got to give something away to get him. The other way is put information out there that's not true, right? And disinformation can scare people off of a kid, right? There were a number of sliders in the draft. Matt Corral, 3rd round, okay? And he was, in my opinion, the second best quarterback in the draft.
Number 94, Jeff, going to the Panthers.
All right, so there was some concern about some things in his past, right? And teams got scared away from him until Carolina said the risk is worth the potential reward in the 3rd round. Now, that's a kid that's openly talked about his battles with depression. Apparently, there's some off-field things with alcohol. But that's the kind of stuff that's not on film, that we're not privy to. That's what the information gatherers, they have to find that kind of stuff out. They will interview everybody in that kid that has anything to do with that kid to find out where the truth lies. Dean, on the other hand, has got some health issues, right? There's 2 things that pushed him down. He's 5'11", right? Actually, there's 3 things. He's 5'11", right? He doesn't have great measurables, right? He's not going to run 4.4, right? He's 230 pounds, and he's got health issues. He's got an injury history, okay? So again, it's all about risk and reward, okay? There's some risks there because he's undersized for the position. He doesn't have, quote, speed for the position, and he's got an injury history. So how do you go from being the best player on tape at the national champion, the outright leader of the defense, right? The guy's a mechanical engineering major, right? He'll get through the playbook the first day, right? I mean, there's no question with any of that stuff. Well, it's those other factors that drove his stock down, and people just, plus he's got, the other factor is, and I think this is another one of the silly things, he's at a, quote, undervalued position, right? It's just like running back. I mean, Breece Hall in the 2nd round? Huh?
The whole
Walker in the 2nd round? I mean, if you think about Pete Carroll is 72 years old, and he was probably doing backflips when they drafted Walker, because he's exactly what the Seahawks want.
This is the thing. I think we could talk about Seattle and the quarterback situation for the next 25 minutes now. However, Jermaine Johnson going 26. I knew my sleeping pattern wasn't too bad. I got it there in some way. Just finally to wrap the show off. You're welcome back on anytime, Jeff, to talk about the rest of these picks. What's been the one that stood out for you over the last few days? Maybe not in round one, but maybe looking at 2 or 3. I seen Arizona got Trey McBride, Kansas City getting Sky Moore, at 54 in the draft. I can see the excitement there was mad. But is there anybody that you think we're not really talking about that might have sort of crossed your mind? That Patriots pick, Jeff, the strange pick, yeah.
The draft pick that might have as much pressure on him as the first round pick, Trayvon Walker, is Christian Watson in Green Bay, right? Because Green Bay's desperate for receiver help.
34, right? And they went up to get him, didn't they, as well?
Yeah, they had the package picks to get him, right? Because they backed themselves in a corner when they didn't take him in the first day. There was so much talk about the Packers trading up because they needed to get one of those marquee receivers. And then the receivers started to go off the board and the Packers didn't move. It'll be interesting to see. And Scott Pioli really liked it, that they got value picks early and then got their receiver, moved up to get their receiver. That's great if this kid develops. Again, you're talking about a thin receiver who's tall, who can run like crazy, but he played at North Dakota State, right? Now, that doesn't mean he's a bad player. It just means that he hasn't, the jump is going to be bigger than it would have been for Wilson or Olave or, any of the receivers who played at bigger programs. So there'll be some pressure on that kid. He reminds me of a little bit when I watch him on tape, Jordy Nelson. Now, he's not as strong as Jordy Nelson yet, but he's got that kind of stuff. And if he can turn into anything like Jordy Nelson, I think he can be a really good player for Aaron Rodgers.
Exciting time in Green Bay then in that case, Jeff. Jeff, obviously, folks, for anyone watching this or listening to this podcast, they can still, even after the draft's over, check out the Gridiron draft guide, Simon Clancy, and just check out how their new players on their team are doing. It's a 240-page in-depth guide. You can check it out. The link is in the description and the bio below as well. Jeff, I know you're traveling to Canada now after today. I want to wish you the very best, safe travels, and I hope you enjoy your last day in Vegas. Thank you very much for doing this. Getting up at 6 in the morning to do this, for everyone listening and watching to this, and take care, man. At Jeff_Reinebold, at Coffee Reinebold, and obviously on Sky Sports as well all the time. Jeff, thank you so much, man.
Appreciate it, Michael. Take care. Bye.